Hey, what's going on? This is Jay Farrell. You listening to the Hard NOC Life podcast. What up, though?
Well, it's the NOC in full color. You see me? The Hard NOC Life.
Welcome to Hard NOC Life. I am Keith Chow.
I am Dominic Ma.
How are you doing, Dominic Ma?
Pretty good. I mean, not really, but I just say that to be social.
Well, it is a weird time. Did you partake in any of the sports ball activities from the weekend, like say the NFL draft or Major League Baseball? I know you were texting me about the Cubs, and I did not respond because we were losing. So
yeah, we won't test people with like early season baseball things, but I did watch NFL draft, and it figures into my novel that I'm writing, coincidentally, and yeah, that was interesting. Did you watch NFL draft?
Do you know the president, Donald Trump, is taking credit for Shadur Sanders getting drafted?
Oh, but if he was worth anything as a president, wouldn't he have gotten drafted in the first round?
That's my thought.
What the hell is that even a thing to take credit for?
This was a real thing in the press secretary's briefing this morning. So the funny thing is, and maybe because he's got a relationship with Dion or something, who knows? But the funny thing is, at the briefing this morning, the press secretary Carolyn Levitt said, as soon as he tweeted that, Shadur gets drafted a day or two later, which, to your point, that means nothing. But they're basically taking credit for Shadur Sanders getting drafted. I just thought that was hilarious.
That is monstrously, hilariously depressing. Yeah, I would say that just proves something we all kind of know, which is the only thing Trump does is read things which are trending on social media, whatever, and insert himself into them.
Like, you remember
in case anyone was unclear, this is the only thing he does.
Like, you remember the good old days when he wasn't in politics, but he was like tweeting about Robert Pattinson and Kristen, what's her name, Stewart in Twilight. Like,
I do not remember that.
That was a thing that happened too. I wish we would have that person back who would just tweet about Twilight and leave the rest of us alone.
Yeah, man, we did not even set up the Shadur Sanders things for our True Nerd audience. Sorry, guys. We had no idea what we're talking about. Shadur Sanders was a famous son. Shadur Sanders was supposed to go in the first round. He went in the fifth round. That was the scandal. Yeah. I'm on the side of, I do understand there are many levels to it. I'm on the side of like, it's not like the biggest fight in the world for me because he is the son of Deion Sanders. I mean, he's a famous rich kid. He's not like the guy with like tons of struggles. So I'm not like
right. Plus, he's got a bunch of NIL money too. So it's not like the contract piece does not.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really following the whole like this is akin to Colin Kaepernick either because
I don't think it is.
Kaepernick got blacklisted for standing up, or ironically kneeling down, not standing up. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like there was a message behind Colin Kaepernick's like defiance, I guess.
Yeah, that was sort of a significant culture war fight to fight.
Yeah, the culture war piece of like the Shadur stuff is like I don't get, because it just to me he came off as like a arrogant nepo baby, and that's why
as much a nepo baby as he is anything else, and
that's why teams kind of didn't want him.
Yeah, so that's why it's not a tragic story, I would say. It is
but it was the dominant news story in like sports media.
It was one of them. Yeah. Well, there was some Schadenfreude involved because he was such like set up to succeed kind of guy in the context that he's in. Many people who don't follow football at all jumped in with, a take on the racial dynamics, which is fine. All right. Do you want to talk about Shadur Sanders for another hour? I don't know.
For all the people who are still listening. I want to focus on Star Wars.
That's almost rhyme with Andor.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about.
Sanders,
the Shadur Andor.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a Star Wars name, definitely.
Yes, Shadur is probably someone in Andor.
Probably.
Well, let's talk about Andor because last week we had not had an opportunity to see the first chunk of episodes. It's interesting what they're doing with this season of Andor, in which they release essentially the entire 3-story arc every week rather than one episode a week. Yeah. And apparently there's a time jump between each 3-story arc.
That's awesome. That's another creative storytelling thing, which is kind of the thing I love about, well, Star Wars originally, starting on episode 4, and this show carrying on that tradition. That's crazy. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and they kind of did that last season, which was like 3 years ago, but they dropped them once a week. So one of the complaints about Andor in the first season was it was a slow build,
Yeah.
and it's still kind of like a dense
Yeah.
story. Where are you on season 2 of Andor so far?
Oh, season 2 of Andor is really great, with the large caveat that if you are in it for the pew pew, this show is not really for you. You. If you're in it for, it is more for fans of like military thriller, political drama with great writing, directing, and acting. And that's why I mainly wanted to ask you sort of where you stand on the question of like, who is it for? You know, it's not really for kids. It's too much for kids, we would say.
Yeah,
And recently Star Wars has been trending towards being for kids, right?
sure.
Um, and
Well,
it,
and you could argue Star Wars has always been for kids.
yeah, yeah. And now, so here's a show that comes along for the grown-up kids who are like, if only Star Wars was a little bit more adult. If only it's more a little bit more like Breaking Bad or one of these adult shows that I watch.
I mean, it's prestige.
And,
If Star Wars were prestige drama, for
yeah,
sure, Andor.
and it's doing that. But I was curious if, if you like you said, um, well, sorry, it'll come back to me. But where you stand on what the what audience it's because it's definitely for an audience because it's very very good for that audience, but
Well,
it does not have the mythic element that we traditionally liked out of Star Wars.
yeah, I will also say, the culture war aspect of it is interesting too, because there is a fan base, like Star Wars fan base, and I actually get into this with Laura and Lola. In fact, let me tease at the end of this episode, I'm going to tack on the audio from my conversation with Lauren. You can actually see the video of it on YouTube right now, and we'll drop that link in the description as well. She just got back from Star Wars Celebration in
Yeah,
Japan last
right
week,
on.
and and actually that you can kind of see that in on display in the convention space too, because what I was about to say is that like Star Wars fandom, especially in the last 10 years since the this revival with Force Awakens and beyond,
Mm-hmm.
there is a level of toxicity in the fandom that's fueled by the internet, fueled by social media, and also amplifying what turns out to probably be a very small vocal minority of loud people on the internet who like to make thumbnails on YouTube
Mm-hmm.
about how woke Star Wars is.
Yeah.
And they're the same people who like, these typically 30-40-year-old men who want to claim Star Wars as their own, who you would think would be all for an adult skewing Star Wars show,
Hmm.
who are also having issues with the show on kind of like no cause other than like it's about politics, and it's got all of these allegories, undocumented, and it's not even an allegory, it's like straight up
No,
undocumented
it's
immigrants.
literally about undocumented immigrants, and he uses the word nuance, which is crazy. Imagine nuance. Um,
Who is the audience is a great question, because I think, yeah, it's not geared towards little kids like that. That's what Skeleton Crew and Jedi Adventures are more for. And even like, like the pew pew folks who like to see lightsabers and lasers aren't getting that from this.
yeah. I mean, because you said it's a
But
slow
that's not, to
build.
me, I'm not saying that as that's a compliment in my
No,
mind.
it's a compliment. It's a different kind of show. The central thing is about there's a colonial imperial force taking everything over. What do you do? It does not have the traditional mythic aspect of things that we liked in Star Wars. The knight in shining armor with laser sword, you know, versus a sort of nebulously big dark evil thing. The mythic thing. The Mandalorian has more of that, right? It hit more of the traditional Star Wars buttons. This one definitely hits the hero moment button now and then, but in a very methodical way every now and then, and it's not all about that. And you could argue it the traditional mythic joys of Star Wars maybe are not in it at all, which I think is interesting because again, I love the show. Um, and I mean, I don't know, so that's why I just think it's a interesting open question.
I mean, to that point, beyond just like the one or two hero moments, like there is a whole significant portion, like a whole story plot line that's the Star Wars version of the Wannsee Conference, the famous Nazi,
Yeah,
you know, boardroom in which they were discussing the final solution. There are several films that were, and I think Tony Gilroy actually on a podcast said that was his inspiration for the whole Orson Krennic scenes in the film
yeah,
where they're plotting out how they're going to genocide Gorman, you
yeah.
know, and it's so
It's
benign. It's so like they're in a conference room and there's like the PR guy and there's like appetizers and they're calmly discussing genocide, like, and how they're going to go about doing it. That kind
yeah.
of thing, it's like it's amazing to see. It's like such a, again, we talked about in the first season of Andor, like the whole banality of evil, like the Dedra and Cyril characters being like this, like, removed from the rest of the context. It's kind of like a domestic, not, I wouldn't say romantic comedy, but like, having dinner with the in-laws.
Oh, that part is freaking awesome. It's so good. Yeah.
But you don't think about the interior lives of like Imperials,
Yeah,
because
we never had before.
Dedra is like discussing genocide at work and coming home to like, oh, here comes the mother-in-law kind of question, like
Yeah.
that kind of juxtaposition is so interesting.
Yeah, no, that's what's genius about it. I mean, if you will, like the joy of it is unpacking every kiddie aspect of Star Wars, which was like very shorthand and very simplified before. Stormtroopers had no personality. It's just good versus evil, right? There's something awesome about Tony Gilroy going in and trying to like bring detail and life to every single aspect of that. What are those Imperial people doing? What are all the different rebel factions doing when they're getting together? Do we have do we have a core issue that we can all get around? Yes. And Luthen explains it in his famous speech. Andor represents it. The Empire cannot win. We got to get together somehow. Even though they are also human beings, it turns out. And yes, that romantic comedy with Diderot. Sorry.
Like Cyril lying on the bed. I
Nero
mean, it
Nero
was a straight up
is
like,
my favorite part. I am yeah. I no one can see, but I am I am doing this whole podcast recording crumpled on the bed like Cyril was at the end of that scene in homage to that part. It was so good. It's so like, there are crumpled on the bed moments and there are crumpled on the bed moments, and like the way his leg is hanging off the side, it's so clearly
but his
like
eyes are
framed.
wide open, staring
Yeah.
off into
He looks
nothingness.
like sort of a broken action figure, basically. So pain, incredibly well done. And the scene preceding it, again, confess some massive crush on Miro, even though she is evil and cruel and tortured Bix and is a terrible Imperial officer. I think she's fascinating.
Mhm.
And the scene where, you know, she dresses down Cyril's mom and sits down terms with him. For all of us who have mom issues, that was a very important scene. A fantasy fulfillment scene, one would even say. So, and that shit is deep because she's also very mean about it. You know,
And I think, again, your grand thesis for this episode is that, like, who is the audience? And I do wonder about like the media literacy of people who do consume like nerd culture nowadays is so surface level, you
let's say
know.
there's a spectrum, but okay.
Well, I mean, just some of the discourse that, like, the thing, what the most of like what social media and like the kind of like generic nerd fan base is focused on is like, oh, Mon Mothma's dancing, or
Yes,
the
that was a
other,
meme instantly.
it
That was
became a
a
meme instantly,
big,
right?
big meme. Yeah.
And Star Wars even released like a 8-hour video of like her dancing on loop, the way like they did for
Mm,
Baron Zemo. Like, it's like the thing is, it kind of undercuts like the power of that scene, because the whole reason she's like,
yeah.
getting pissed drunk and letting it loose to Niamos is because she's realizing, oh, I just sent my maybe lover to his death in a very Fredo from Godfather 2 way.
Yeah,
You know,
she's having
and
big drama.
yeah, and so I'm like, I'm committing myself to this
Yeah,
cause. And then the other reading of that scene I've seen also from like, folks who are more on the left side of the political spectrum saying like, oh, if only we had leaders who were as committed to fighting fascism as Mon Mothma is. And I'm like, but in universe, the whole point of her character is they know she is this kind of like, you know, effete, like elite, you know, um, power broker that people don't realize is fighting fascism. Like,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, people are drawing the parallels of like Mon Mothma trying to make like, why can't the Democrats be more like Mon Mothma? And like, if they were, you wouldn't know it is the whole point.
Right. Yeah, I mean, let's do that reading of it for a second. There, Mon Mothma's uh crew is like representative of a certain thing. Let's call it boomers or Generation X. Like people who are doing okay and they're already in the like suburban upper middle class level, and they also have to figure out what their response is to colonial imperial force taking over everything, if any. So her kind of dramas, well, a little complex and definitely none of them have happy answers, are
Mhm.
things like, well, all my friends suck and need money and will probably, turn me in, to the Gestapo when the time comes. What do I do? What side am I on? How much action am I going to take? And, that's an extraordinarily relevant and difficult thing, much more difficult than Star Wars usually takes on. It just so happens that Tony Gilroy is a great writer and thinks about these things. But yeah, I also that whole scene is so beautiful. So to the point of like, there's not that much pew pew, there's not that much lasers and space fighting. It does like build to certain ecstatic, cathartic moments.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she's having big drama, very hard questions. Is she with the rebellion? Is she going to kill one of her colleagues? Uh, child stress, children getting married and sort of like a child marriage thing. That's all like weird. Um, but I just want to say like for any of us who've been to a wedding when like it's really dull and stuffy and there's a moment when the youth take over and start dancing, like you want to be part of it, and that's cathartic and beautiful. And that's how in lieu of having a big space operatic battle, that's what that scene did for me. It's like, fuck, this is a lot of shit. Oh, look, young people are dancing to the wobble or electric slide or whatever. It's a freaking great moment.
I mean,
Um,
I think, and it's funny too because like Tony Gilroy has been on record saying like he's writing his stories organically, and there's no agenda to like the story, like they just happen to kind of mirror our reality. And I think
mhm,
I'm not
yes.
uh kind of saying the opposite because he wrote these episodes long before this new administration, but it's difficult to not graft the real world onto the
Right.
galaxy far far away. And that's always been the case even from George Lucas, right? Like he was the rebels were the Viet Cong, you know what I mean? Like this was
Yeah.
not it was not allegory. He was like saying this is the story I'm telling the story of the Vietnam War, right?
Yeah.
And it's what I find fascinating is like I said earlier about the Orson Krennic and the Imperials, kind of like this banal conference room where they're discussing how to destroy this planet very
Right.
calmly, very matter of factly, is very reminiscent of like conversations that are probably being had in government office buildings today in places far and wide. But similarly, the other kind of like political grafting that I did watching the episode is like when Cassian encounters that rebellion faction on that planet who are infighting.
Yeah.
That's so to me it was so relevant because
I
like
know.
that's the problem with the left, right? Like we love to fight each other so much that we lose sight of who we're supposed to be fighting.
Those guys cannot get it together and they're not going to get off the planet because they can't collaborate enough to operate a TIE fighter or whatever. They got problems. Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't understand that whole rock, paper, scissors things they were doing. I thought that was to like accentuate how banal their conflicts were. It's like,
But
or but
I read
I
that
don't
whole
know.
thing as like, not that Gyor is not, again, not necessarily critiquing like organizing,
Yeah,
but like that is I've that's a problem I've seen for a long time, and it's kind of how we got in the situation we ended up in this election cycle where we're like we had so many like that's the problem I guess with a big
yeah,
tent or a giant
yeah,
rebellion against a unified fascist force is that to get like all we need is to understand like we need to fight the stormtroopers, but we're too busy going, yeah, but I had called dibs on this TIE fighter and I
yeah,
called dibs on that gun, and we're too busy infighting and bickering and factionalizing
yeah.
that we don't. I mean,
That
that's
was
what
that,
the
that was
Mon
the
Mothma and the Princess Leia and eventually have to do is bring the rebellion together to be a unified
yeah.
front.
And I guess I hope that happens at some point in the story, because otherwise it's another one of those things that's just like a little too real. Because Andor doesn't really solve the problem. He just like goes, "Oh, I'm out of here with this," and like just takes off. So when we leave them, they're still just bickering about petty shit, as they're all supposed to be, rebelling. And yeah, so that opens a lot of doors, and
But he goes from one real world problem in terms of like the left being unable or unwilling to organize against fascism, and he finds himself on the planet with Brasso and Bix, where again another real world allegory
yeah.
where they are undocumented migrants hiding from ice the galactic ice going
Yeah,
around looking for
providing for
you
the
know
war machine with the
undocumented.
labor of with their farm labor.
And then
Um,
and I wouldn't even say the first depiction, but probably the most like blatant depiction of sexual assault on a Star Wars
yeah, and
show.
again, the internet, for what it's worth, had many opinions on that. Um, Again, it's an adult show. It's not for traditional Star Wars uh things. And yeah, that's what happens when colonial imperial forces come to town. They uh there's a lot of abuse of power, abuse of women. Um,
And
with
to your point,
in the
like,
universe of the show, that's exactly what would happen, and we should see that.
and honestly, it's not the first time it's been depicted in Star Wars. Like people were like, all acting very like, oh, oh me, oh
Mm.
my, how could you show this in a Star? Like it's Princess Leia was famously called Slave Leia in a gold bikini on Tatooine. Like, do you don't think there was some SA going on there?
Well, yeah, okay, I don't know about the analogy there, Keith, but
No,
I mean,
but I'm just saying,
there's
like,
level. Okay,
it's that I'm pretty sure she did not consent. Princess Leia, I'm saying, did not consent
yes,
to,
we didn't quite have that reading of it at the time, because we
or
were so
even the
fascinated with
Twi'lek
the
dancers
costume.
in Jabba's palace. I mean,
Well, right,
the
yeah, no,
implication.
yeah, no, yeah, Java as Java's a person trafficker too. I want to say human trafficking, but I think it's all whatever.
Biped.
He's life form. He's a life form trafficker.
Yeah.
Java is, and that's fucked up. But yeah, I mean there's the question of like how much abuse do you want to throw on Bix as one character, because she did get terribly tortured in the first
Yeah,
season,
I know. I
and
feel
when
bad for
you
her.
get so much abuse thrown at you, that raises the question of whether you're kind of refrigerating a character for the purpose of trauma porn. But it's actually a very effective scene because, you know, she fights him off and kills the guy, which is basically what should happen. It reminded
Yeah,
me of the
yeah.
scene in True Romance. Just a very visceral, like, man versus woman fight scene with everything at stake. And so I thought again it was brilliantly done within the universe of the show, which is again not for the skeleton crew crowd.
Yeah.
If you try to make it for that, it won't work. But there's an exploration of these things, and it neatly like goes into like the most superhero moments of the show, which is kind of like, oh, where they're coming to like rape and kill us all basically, and they've got way more guns than us. This is fucked up. What happens? Cassian shows up with air support. Like that's such a superhero move. It's fucking awesome. Um,
Less
so
awesome is what happens to Brasso, though. That's I
yeah,
was
sorry,
very,
Brasso.
I was
Where
very.
you? Oh, are you
Yeah,
rooting for
I like
Brasso?
Brasso. I
Oh,
like
okay.
Brasso a lot.
I thought it was kind of convenient how they eliminated one corner of the love triangle that was set up for isn't
You thought it was a love triangle? I don't know. I didn't
I
see Brasso as
did
a.
No, was he the husband? Wait, did I lose something? There is a love triangle between Brasso, Bix, and Andor, right?
Is there? I don't
And
recall that from season one.
that was season one, wasn't it? Or am I thinking of a totally different character? Or at least a relationship triangle.
I don't remember. I
Well,
don't remember Brasso and Bix being a thing. Maybe they were.
they were,
Maybe they
unless I'm
were. I don't
thinking of a
recall.
totally different guy. Anyway, sorry. Well, someone is screaming at us about our continuity problems. But anyway, but the point is,
I
yeah,
liked Brasso.
okay.
And they left a B2 emo behind,
Yeah, they left B2 emo again. Right.
and he was
Yeah,
so worried about Cassian.
that's one thing I want to say was like, even though there's not a lot of obvious Star Wars stuff, there is fan service in like subtle ways, like that Gilroy gets in there somehow. Like, for example, those of us who had the toys were always fascinated by the vehicles that had like two fighter pilot seats as opposed to one. And it kind of gets into that, like in the very first scene where he's like, "Oh, there's this TIE fighter is made for two action figures as one." Do you know what I mean? There's not obvious like fan servicing moments, but there are things like the droids and sort of attention to the gear, the tech that make you go, "Oh, yeah, this is Star Wars."
This is still
That's
happening in that pre
yeah,
A New Hope world.
that's
I,
comforting.
I mean, just real quick, you mentioned that first scene. I also want to say, like, I really appreciate, to your point about like Gilroy's ability as a writer, when Cassian and that technician have that conversation, because like he's, I guess, turned her because she's just a mechanic who works for
Yeah.
the Empire, but was able to convince her to help the rebellion. And it's, to your point about like this is more than just black and white, good versus evil, because like it's the whole Clerks thing from Kevin Smith. Like when you blew up the Death Star, what about all the contractors?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
she worked for the, I mean, and she even says, I had fun here. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a life for me. Like all of us who live in America who are participating in, empire,
Yeah.
as well, and capitalism and everything. Like there is a making that nuance, and not, they're not all just automatons who are blindly following Darth Vader. You know what I mean? Like there were real
Oh,
people who
yeah.
have a job who just happen to work, for that TIE fighter deck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
Doc.
it was a great point to begin the whole show on because yeah, there are people and she there are people who just like working on jet fighters. We're not saying like
Right, right,
they're fascists.
right.
Um,
Well, but to
they're
your
just
point about
out
like
there.
how reductive the internet can be, like if you
Yeah.
happen to work for a contractor, like,
Yeah,
well,
maybe they'll think they're good. But yeah, it was a great point to start it on. Um, and the speech, classic Gilroy speech, kind of inspiring. Um,
if you could have like 3 minutes with Tony Gilroy, what would you like to ask him?
oh, that is a good and loaded question. Um,
I don't know what you mean.
uh,
If only we
I
had that opportunity.
I would sort of like to ask him oddly about timeline things because you were just talking about how we were talking about how relevant it is, but all the threads of these things, way before Trump, way before 2016. We just noticed them now because they came to a head. They came to
Hmm.
a Death Star head, let's say. The things like young men being disaffected and needing some kind of structure. The things about certain, pools of power growing in the government that were waiting for the right moment. Obviously, he was thinking about these things. They
Yeah.
preceded 2016 and they're coming to a head right now. I'd ask him about things like the Cyril and Miro characters, where you got the idea to explore those people and what their actual motivations would be. And that's just would just be question one, and then I'd think about something else
Yeah, yeah.
because
Well,
all the characters are delightful.
I mean, because we don't think about like careerism within the Empire, right? Like
Mhm.
Grand Moff Tarkin is just Grand Moff Tarkin, but like, you know,
Yeah.
he ascended the ranks of the military to become Grand Moff.
At one point, he was Cyril, and
Right. No,
Cyril
really.
aspires. Right, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's the grand operatic stuff like Anakin Skywalker's fall and everything, which is like shout out to the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith, which played
Right. In
on big screens over
movies,
the weekend. But
in
like
the cinema, yeah.
this is what gives kind of like what I appreciate about stories like Andor is that it gives that like it pumps the reality into that like mythic story that you can
Mhm.
have like it's the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of like, you know,
Mm.
what were
Yeah,
they
yeah,
doing
yeah,
while Hamlet was soliloquying, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And that's what's cool about Andor.
Yeah, that would be a good question, a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern themed question towards Tony Gilroy. I think that would be well taken. Yeah. And and then I would ask, because there is the aspect that we know how it ends. Or do we? Well, we know how
Oh
this
yeah.
phase
we know
ends.
we know Andor about to get blown up with
Eventually it gets blown
Jyn
up, and
Erso.
yeah, then good old Jenner. So I don't know just how that affects the whole planning of the arc towards of the thing, and what we're supposed to carry from that. And then I'd ask if there was a director's cut available where the fate of the universe does not depend on file transfer speed, because that's the one thing that annoys me about Rogue One, the central thing. But I digress.
Well, you know,
That's a nerd issue.
McGilroy famously was brought in to do a rewrite on Rogue One. I think the Rogue One that we got was not the Rogue
Yeah,
One
he
that
probably
we
didn't
were
make up that part. He would have come up with
going
something
to get.
better that was
Yeah.
character based. But yeah, it was ridiculous that just they couldn't get the Death Star plans emailed through a air in like
Airdrop.
what? Yeah. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Sorry, it's just a button. I didn't mean to press.
Well, you know, I mean, he would never answer it, I'm sure, because there was decorum between him and Gareth Edwards. But like,
Yes.
what would he have written if he had just like carte blanche to write Rogue One? You know what I mean? Like, because he did the rewrite on Rogue One, so there was
Yeah.
already established stuff. Because clearly he fell in love with the characters of Andor, and
Yeah. Yeah.
decided to like tell his backstory. Like there were several characters in that film that he could have told the backstory of, and he decided to tell Cassian's.
Yeah. Um.
And then creating characters like Luthien and
Yeah.
Bix and Dedra.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind seeing Donnie Yen again. But now we're sort of wildly snowballing, spitballing. I want to bring up one thing, which is like, do you think we'll ever get the old John Williams music themes in this show? Like
Yeah, I
at
don't
the
think so.
end. Oh man.
I don't think so.
Then for me, that would bring it all together.
Well, again, going back to that first scene, I don't know if you noticed when you watched it. Like, I think it's the first time in Star Wars where you go from the like the top of the episode all for like a good 5 minutes, maybe, where there's no music.
Uh,
Because
uh,
usually, like all Star Wars starts very like
yeah.
you know
Well, yeah, but also
bombastically.
yeah, yeah, true. But also the subversion of the scroll thing, which is that it almost had a scrolling text, but it just had just the date, right?
Right,
The
right.
BBY
BBY
four
for
years or whatever.
BBY, and
To
then
me,
and then
to me
it
that's
cuts
clever fan
it's
service.
smash cut to like the floodlights coming on, the stage lights essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that was really cool. It was like Andor
yeah,
for BBY, darkness, and then
yeah,
boom, the show's on,
yeah,
and then it's just like all you hear is the sounds of like the starship dock and not anything else.
yeah,
That was to me, I don't know. Again, they're operating on a different level from other
yes,
Star Wars things.
they absolutely are. More in and definitely borrows things from things like the Bourne movies and
Hmm.
just more like spy thrillers, which I think is what he's going for. Sort of the making of a guerrilla fighter kind of story.
Right, right.
Which again was the adult reading of Star Wars if you were reading it that way.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
um,
My only critique is that it was so long between seasons 1 and 2 that I didn't remember as clearly. Like we don't remember who Brasso's,
don't quite remember what was going on there.
but not enough. And I felt like the recap was not enough to get me.
Well, there was a
Like
lot
hooked.
going
It
on.
was. I mean,
I
I
mean,
kind of recalled like, oh yeah, that happened, and then that happened. But
yeah, did we know we haven't quite gotten back into the Val and Cinta story yet? But I really love them too, and I want to see what
yeah.
happens. But clearly, there's some crazy queer woman drama going on there. Uh,
Well, Cinta
um,
shows up at the very end. She's the one who's about to like,
yes,
Fredo,
she's
the other guy. What's his name?
yeah, she's still doing like the extreme dirty work stuff for the rebellion clearly, and Val seems very conflicted. And like just wearing a nice dress at the wedding, and that whole thing that shit is very deep, and
Yeah.
I assume we'll get to that in the next trilogy. Oh, I so love the idea of mini trilogies. I can't even tell you.
Yep. For 4 weeks, we're
Gosh,
going to get three story arcs.
yeah,
Instead of like one episode a week.
yeah. Gosh bless you, Gilroy, for that structural conceit. It's awesome. Um,
Yeah. Final thoughts on Andor while we await the second drop this week.
final thoughts. I hope we do find out who the audience is. I want to meet them. I'm getting back into social media to chat with people about Andor. Let's say that
Mhm.
kind of thing. Haven't really been doing social media because it's all too shitty and difficult. I would like the idea of chatting with people about Andor.
Well, that's a great question to put out there to the people listening to us right now. If you have comments, who are you, and are you watching and enjoying Andor? Feel free to, if this is you're listening to this on YouTube, feel free to drop some comments. If you want to shoot us a message, you can email us at info@thenerdsofcolor.org, and maybe we'll read your questions on air next time. Who knows?
Sure. Feel free to refresh us on the Brasso Pix Andor thing, which I think Keith has some selective blind spot for some reason. I know maybe you're just looking at the droid the whole time. The droid is great.
Yeah,
Um,
well, B2 Emo is my favorite, and I like the way Brasso
yeah,
takes care of him.
yeah.
I just
That's why
remember,
you
like,
like Brasso.
yeah, and
Because
well,
he's
I remember
nice to the
he's
droid.
nice to the droid, and he took care of Cassian's mom when she was
Yeah.
dying and everything. So
Yeah, no, I'm not saying Brasso's bad. Anyway,
he's a good
I
guy.
I'm
R.I.P. Brasso.
if we want to talk about this more, reach out to me on Blue Sky because I'm getting back into Blue Sky more
Yeah.
than the other social medias. I'm Dominic Ma, Dama, DOMMAH. And I also have a pop music group called 12 Valentines, which is about pop songs with superhero comic book tropes. But yeah, I would like to connect with people on the subject of Andor and maybe other things that are tangentially related, if I may say that, because we might need to, connect disparate groups for some, I don't know, larger purpose. Maybe.
Yeah.
You think that might need to happen?
Well, may the force be with us is all I
Indeed.
have to say. So that's that. We'll put a pin on that conversation about Andor. We do not talk about Andor with Lauren because she came back from Japan and did not. This conversation you're about to hear was recorded before the first 3 episodes of Andor dropped. So check out my talk with Lauren about all things Star Wars Celebration, and then we'll see you guys next time on Hard Knock Life.
Yub nub.
Welcome to Hard Knock Life. I'm Keith Chow. This is a special edition of the podcast. Special edition, no pun intended. We're going to be talking about Star Wars Celebration, and I brought on Lauren Lola, who was repping us at Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo. She is back from her adventures in Japan. Welcome back to not only America, but welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Keith. I am so jet lagged. So if I sound a little incoherent, that's why.
Well, this wasn't your first celebration, was it?
No, it's only my second and my first overseas one.
Your first time in Japan?
Yes.
So before we get to the Star Wars of it all, how was your experience in Japan? Because it was like a bucket list thing for you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I've been wanting to visit ever since I was a teenager. And so 2 years ago at Celebration London, when it was announced that it was going to be in Japan, I'm like, I mean, I've always wanted to go to Japan. And any Star Wars fan probably knows that like a lot of the main influences are from like Akira Kurosawa films. So I felt like, well, this is the perfect opportunity for me to go. And I did.
Well, that's one of the cool things about it being in Tokyo this year is that, as you said, like the Japanese influence on Star Wars is, present from the very beginning. In 1977 is pretty much George Lucas's take on Hidden Fortress.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like being at a Star Wars celebration in Tokyo? Like, how did the local folks kind of embrace it? How did, I'm sure there was a mix of, Japanese fans and like international fans at the convention. What was the overall vibe of this celebration of Star Wars?
Right. I mean, on one hand, it didn't feel that different from like the previous celebration and just conventions in general that I've been to. It on one hand felt like any other convention I've been to. But I think the main difference is just that yes, it's in Japan, so you're going to be seeing a lot of translations and like like on the live stage, for instance, there will be like Japanese subtitles for those who maybe don't speak English. I think the official report, if I'm not mistaken, is that half the people in attendance were from Asia, and that I think 30% are from the US, which I was very surprised by the number. And yeah, it really did feel like that. It felt like a good mix of fans from all over the world, with Japan and Asia otherwise being the dominant presence there.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing about, and you know this as a longtime Star Wars fan, you've kind of covered it on the podcast and the website. The Asian influence on Star Wars goes beyond just, Akira Kurosawa. There's like, I used to make the joke that the only Asians in Star Wars growing up was like the Nien Nunb in the Millennium Falcon, maybe the Nemoidians, and Queen Amidala's wardrobe. They were like those were the only Asians. But
well, there was that one guy in the original trilogy,
right? The one guy in the one pilot in the original trilogy. But and then I think in the special edition of Return of the Jedi, one of the Twi'lek dancers was an Asian woman.
Yeah.
But so not slim pickings for 40 years, but the new incarnations of Star Wars, the post Disney Star Wars, there's been way more Asian representation, so much so that like the post that I made back in I think 2017 when Last Jedi came out is completely obsolete now, because we've had since then Carson Teva, is that his name, from Kim's Convenience, who plays the pilot in Ahsoka, and
oh yeah
you got him, you got the Lee Jung Jae character in The Acolyte, you have Manny Jacinto, you have just so many more Asians in Star Wars, that to have the celebration in Japan, and plus you have like Star Wars Visions, which is like what if Star Wars but anime, like what is your kind of take on Asian representation in Star Wars and how it's evolved since kind of like Rogue One and Last Jedi kicked the doors down?
I mean, it's kind of like what you said. Like I remember when you made that post about Asians in Star Wars, and yeah, like if you were to do that post now, it would be really long because there's so many since then. It really feels like Disney has been making up for lost time in the last decade of getting to get as many Asian folks into the canon as much as possible. And I'm seeing that. Does it always land well? Not necessarily, but I think with more projects and with more opportunities for people to come into the door, yeah, there's just so much to look forward to. It's nice to, for like people like us to see ourselves in a project as universal as Star Wars.
Right, and then you've spoken to like not Morgan Elsbeth. You've spoken to the actress who plays
Diana
Santana, like and Ming Na Wen is Fennec Shand. We got Natalie Bordizzo as Sabine. Like it just it is a golden age of Asians in Star Wars, and it just made sense, I think, to have it in Asia. Being there on the ground, what was your biggest takeaway from the whole weekend before we dive into like the specifics?
Biggest takeaway, I mean, I kind of went into it with no expectations other than what I experienced from the only other celebration I've been to, which was in Anaheim in 2022. But I think my big takeaway is that the folks behind Star Wars understand that there is a deep appreciation for the animated projects. I feel like anyone who's maybe more on the outskirts of Star Wars, who don't follow it as closely as I do, maybe don't recognize just how good quality the animated stories are. And so there were a lot of announcements around the fact that it's the 20th anniversary for Lucasfilm Animation, which I didn't realize, and also like a continuation of Star Wars Visions, which I know we'll get into and all that. Yeah, I think that's my main takeaway, as well as all the other announcements that come in the live action forms too.
Well, I mean, speaking of announcements, I think the Darth Maul series was probably one of the bigger announcements.
Yeah, and they only showed like a bit from that for only a few seconds from their little Lucasfilm Animation montage.
But like Sam Witwer kind of like doing the voice and everything, I think really that was one of the highlights. I mean, the cool thing about Celebration, I think they started this maybe a couple years ago, is that they stream everything live, which is cool. And it's awesome that it was in Japan, so like it streamed at a very like opportune time for me to watch because it was like at night, because the
Yeah.
13-hour time difference. So I was like, I was pretty much watching all like the interviews with like Hayden and Manny and everything, and all the, although they didn't, a lot of the announcements they didn't stream. So like I think you guys got to see like footage from Mandalorian and Grogu and stuff like that.
Oh,
So
right.
they
Yeah.
didn't
I
show
mean,
those on the stream.
yeah. Yeah. I know that for things like that, they don't show them. It's just for like, if you're in the room, you get to see it.
Yeah.
I didn't go to that panel though for Mandalorian and Grogu because I only was there on Saturday and Sunday. I didn't have a batch for Friday. But yeah.
So what were some of the panels you did get to go see live in person?
I went to the panel for Ahsoka.
What's brewing for season 2? Other than I think Hayden is going to be like a full on cast member next year and not just like a secret.
Yeah, he's coming back. That was announced. It's kind of like what you were saying, how like they'll show snippets for those who were in attendance at the panel, and they did that for Ahsoka too, even though they technically haven't started filming yet. So how do they do it? Well, Filoni showed us this old school-esque trailer put together using concept art as the visuals, and it went very, very quickly. So there was only so much to see. But I think if you're a fan of Star Wars Rebels, I'm happy to announce Zeb will be in season 2. So very excited to hear that, because I think we've only seen him so far in like briefly in season 3 of The Mandalorian. What else was in that trailer? There was so much. It went very, very quickly. I'm tempted to say that I think maybe we see Ventress at one point, although I'm not sure. Again, it went really fast, but there's a lot in store. Some of it was a little hard to comprehend, but yeah, I'm excited, and I'm glad.
I mean, Ahsoka, you're talking about the animated stuff, and Ahsoka essentially became like a continuation of Rebels. Like the live, like if you wanted live action Rebels, that's basically what Ahsoka is. I mean, it reunited, at least like what 3/4 of the Ghost crew in the first season, and then, like you said, Zeb will be in next season.
Yes.
I'm sure they'll find a way to bring back Kanan, get Freddie Prinze Jr. to come back or something as a Force ghost, even though I don't think he knows how to be a Force ghost. But with Ezra being, I'm sure, a bigger portion of next season as well. Like, did you ever think when you were watching Rebels like 6 or 7 years ago that you would see like live action Rebels?
No, I don't think so. And I think that's mainly because it was 2018 when it ended, and trying to see like, oh, who's going to make the transition live action? That wasn't really a thing yet, because we were in the midst of the sequel trilogy at the time. And so like, what was it, The Last Jedi, and then also Solo were the big projects to come out of Star Wars at the time. So I wasn't really thinking in the same way I am now about, animation versus live action. So never would have expected it, but I'm glad we're here.
Other than Ahsoka, any other panels you got to be in on the ground?
See, that's the tricky part with Celebration, which, if we discuss the concept, I can dive into it more. But yeah, like, it's tricky trying to get into the panels you want to see. I was fortunate to have gotten a panel reservation for Ahsoka, which is why I was able to see it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have been able to. But the only other panel that I saw was on the last day, and it was about the Fett family. So it was a conversation with Tamora Morrison and Daniel Logan.
We happen to be 2 New Zealanders, 2 Kiwis, 2 Maori. No reira e mihia na kia koutou katoa e ngā mana, e ngā rangatira o tēnei whenua o Japan, ka nui te mihi kia koutou katoa, me ngā manuhiri tūwarangi, no ngā hauewha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Christian, that simply means, on behalf of me and Daniel, the mountains and waters of New Zealand, we greet the mountains and waters of this land. And to all the visitors from the 4 winds that have gathered here in Tokyo Celebration 25, greetings, salutations, felicitations, kia ora tātou katoa.
being on the ground, like when I asked you like what was surprising about Star Wars Celebration, I mentioned I did get a chance to watch some of the streams, and
Mhm.
it was, to me, it was very apparent during Manny Jacinto's interview when they have this big stage that they do all like the celebrity interviews that
Yeah,
at
the
least
live stage.
yeah, for the television audience back home. But
Mhm.
it was cool that like, there's been a lot of controversy over the Accolade because it didn't apparently do so hot ratings wise. There's all the backlash from the terrible people on the internet, and it got canceled. And even though like it sets up a really interesting future story,
Mhm.
they kind of swept the whole thing under the rug. So to me, it was actually heartening that they brought out Manny Jacinto to like give a long interview, and the reception he got from the crowd is what I took away from at least watching it 3,000 miles away, is that
Mhm.
I think oftentimes, and this as a Star Wars fan, being a Star Wars fan on the internet is hard because
Yeah.
there's so many terrible Star Wars fans on the internet whose whole
Yeah.
like mission is to be rage baiting people that
Yeah. And I'm just like, do you not have a life outside of that? For God's sake?
but that's why it's heartening that something like Manny Jacinto's reception for the Accolade got the reception that it got, to show that like those guys who are with the terrible thumbnails on YouTube who are just like bitching and complaining about everything woke about Star Wars is a vocal minority. And we should
Mhm.
stop, and we being like Lucasfilm should stop listening to them, number one. That's kind of what happened post
Mhm.
Last Jedi, right? Like they let the toxic fans drown out the voices of like the reasonable people. And if anything, like seeing how Manny Jacinto got accepted and the reception the Accolade got, at least at Celebration, shows that the Star Wars fans are really, there are more of us than them, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Like honestly, Keith, I had a ticket to get an autograph from Manny, and I never got to it because the line for him was so freaking long. I went in the morning and the line was barely moving. And by the time I was getting kind of close, I knew I had to go and get in line for the Fed family panel. I'm just like, oh, I
You had
really
to
hope I
pay.
don't regret this. So I got out of line. And then towards the end of the day, I went back in line and it was even longer than before. And it was still barely moving. And by the time 3 o'clock came around, I'm just like, I have 1 hour left of celebration. Do I really want to spend it in line, especially one that's
Right.
barely moving? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't get to meet him, unfortunately. I'm just like, ah, man, how dare he have followers? But but like that just goes to prove your point, Keith, which is that like, yeah, people are really have been really happy to see him, and being Filipino American, getting to see a Filipino. Wait, he's Canadian.
Yeah.
Filipino North American.
I was gonna say
And
I was about to say same difference, but we can't say that about Canadians and Americans anymore because
I know,
they
yeah.
have a
But
right to
getting
hate
to
us now.
see
So
a Filipino person in a prominent role in a Star Wars project was just really cool to see, especially
yeah,
one as impressive as the Acolyte. So I would have loved to have gone to meet him, and I really hope he does more conventions so I can have more chances.
yeah. I know you weren't at the Mandalorian and Grogu panel, but like, what is your level of so just to set the table
Mhm.
for a little? The most recent pod Dominic and I did was all about Pedro Pascal because
Right.
the Fantastic Four trailer and The Last
Yeah.
of Us, and
Yeah.
of course the Mandalorian, where he's
Mhm.
like always playing father figures. It's like he's being typecast.
Yeah.
But what is your level of excitement for the Mandalorian and Grogu? Because I will say, like, mine's tempered because like
Mm.
I really love the first season of the Mandalorian.
Mhm.
The following couple of seasons I don't love as much as that first season,
Mm.
and I don't know if I would rather have like another season, or like what are they trying to story are they trying to tell with the movie, like where so I have cautious reservations about the movie. Where are you in the Mandalorian and Grogu? I also don't like the title. I'll just put that out there. I feel like it's the most unimaginative title you could come up with for a Star Wars movie.
I wonder if it's meant to emulate like Werewolf and Cub or something like that.
Yeah, Lone Wolf and Cub. Yeah, I'm sure.
Mandalorian and Grogu. Oh, I just realized that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
mean, I'll see it. I
Yeah.
mean, we haven't had a Star Wars film since 2019, so this is long overdue in that department. But I guess I'm just curious to see where the story is going with it, because I feel
Right.
like in season 3 in particular, it kind of like it had a purpose in the fact that the Mandalorians were finally able to take back their home planet. But as far as their journey goes, I'm a little confused as to where it's headed. And so my hope is that we'll get more direction with this upcoming film. And then I'm curious to see what will come after that.
Yeah. I mean, there was also like, I guess half of Boba Fett was the Mandalorian season 2.5 too, right? Like that was the other weird thing about Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And do you think they'll go back to being a TV show, or will it just be he graduated to the movies and they're only going to do movies now?
That's why I'm wondering too, because usually when there's a film following a series, it's kind of like, oh, this is the finale.
Right.
So
Like Community, 6 seasons in a movie.
yeah, like as far as the film goes, like did they even film it on the volume? I'm not even sure. So like would that be considered too low budget for a feature film? Because
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Was Pedro on set?
yeah. With Pedro on set. I'm assuming yes, since there are pictures of him without the helmet. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of like, let's see what happens, and just watch it unfold.
Yeah. The other live action announcement, I just want to get out of the way, and then we can kind of talk more about your time in Japan. Was Sean Levy came out, said they're shooting the next Star Wars movie, Star Wars Starfighter, starring Ryan Gosling. We don't know anything else about it. I'm glad it's Ryan Gosling and not Ryan Reynolds. I said this on.
I was about to say that. I'm just like, thank God it's not Ryan Reynolds.
Sean Levy and Orion, I guess, is, as long as it's one of the Ryans. Yeah, where are you there? Because again, we know nothing about it other than it's about to shoot and that it's Ryan Gosling. Do you have any excitement for this?
I was surprised to hear it, and I'm kind of confused we didn't get anything more like a synopsis or something. I mean, the fact that it's gonna be coming out right around the 50th anniversary of the original Star Wars, I'm just like, well, I hope it has the same energy to align with such a significant anniversary like that. But I don't know. And again, like we know nothing about what this film is about. I'm just like, why Ryan Gosling though? Because again, better than Ryan Reynolds. But one thing
Also,
that
why Sean Levy? Because I'm not a big fan of his either, to be completely transparent.
yeah, I mean, like he directed Deadpool, right?
Deadpool and Wolverine, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not
He
sure.
also, I mean, that's why I was.
I feel like this is kind of a missed opportunity for, again, like we were talking earlier about seeing an increase of Asian representation. I'm just like, why did you hire these two white guys?
The two white guys.
Yeah, one of them being an A-lister. Because
Yeah.
like, one of the main things about the Star Wars films in particular is that it's been a platform to turn unknowns into these, heroes of this Hallmark franchise.
Right. That's an excellent point, because like I can't think of an example of like a super A-lister being in a Star Wars movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
least-
except for the prequel trilogy.
That's true. Ewan McGregor was pretty well known by the time. Liam Neeson, Sam
Natalie
Jackson.
Portman. Yeah, I
Natalie
think
Portman. That's
maybe.
true.
Yeah, I mean, like Hayden Christensen. I'm assuming yes.
He was like, yeah, he was newly introduced through Star Wars. I don't think he was he definitely wasn't an A-lister before Star Wars.
Okay. Yeah, I was really young at the time, so like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. Natalie Portman was a big star. Sam Jackson was one of the biggest stars in the world. Ewan McGregor was kind of like on the cusp of, he was a big indie star.
Yeah.
But not
like I guess he was like
mainstream.
mainly known in Scotland and the UK.
Yeah. Like Trains, because he'd already done Train Spotting at that point. Liam Neeson was a pretty big star. He wasn't as main list, mainstream A-list as he is now when he did Star Wars. Like he was still more of kind of, maybe I would say like B lists. Oh no, that's not true, because I think he had done Schindler's List already, so he was already pretty well known. Yeah, you're right. I completely forgot about the prequels being like filled with mainstream actors. Because the original trilogy, yeah, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford were not, A-list at the time. So Alec Guinness was probably the most famous person in the original Star Wars movie to be.
What about James Earl Jones? Was he?
Well, I guess, I mean, he was famous, but he was only voicing, so it wasn't really like people were going because of him. So. So yeah, those are I think the biggest announcements. Am I leaving anything else? I know there was Visions season 2 was announced.
Season 3.
Or 3. What else was that? Was there anything else? There was another animated show, I think, wasn't there?
Yeah, so like in addition to there being Vision season 3 coming out in October, but one of the shorts from the original first season, The Ninth Jedi, will be getting a limited series coming out next year.
Excited.
Yes, that's one of my favorites from the first season is The Ninth Jedi. So I'm excited to see what that story will become.
What do you like about what is it about the animated stories that appeal to you so much?
Like the anime one specifically, or just animated in general?
Just in general, because I know that like the Visions ones are special, and again, being in Japan, there's an added element of the anime inspired Star Wars. But just because, as you said earlier, like Lucasfilm Animation's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, and what and there are a legion of fans. There's a whole like portion of the fandom where their favorite thing is Clone Wars. Like,
Yeah.
there's people my age who grew up on the original trilogy. There are people your age who grew up on the prequels, and there are kids coming up now that are growing up on the sequel trilogy. But there's a whole faction of people, when they think Star Wars, they think Clone Wars. That is like their main thing. So talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, and you make a point in the fact that, I was at the live stage when Ashley Eckstein was interviewed, and she even asked the audience, how many of you, grew up with Star Wars with Ahsoka as your go-to? And that was so crazy seeing the hands that went up in the audience. Yeah, I mean, like as far as the animated series go, I mean, aside from, having more of a budget to really get to play in the world of Star Wars that you have more constraints with a live action production. Yeah, I mean, it's allowed the opportunity to expand on the different characters that we either know, introduce characters that we don't already know, and also just tell more in-depth stories than the live action counterparts. Like even with all the live action shows that we have now, it's still, I would argue, it's still not as in-depth as we have gotten with shows like the Clone Wars and Rebels and the Bad Batch. So it's just really, for me, it's about that level of storytelling that we get in the animated series that is one of the reasons why I personally gravitate towards them.
Yeah. Any before we wrap up the talk about Star Wars, anything else stick out in your mind from your weekend and the news announcements that came out of the whole convention?
Well, I guess a big question for a lot of us would be like, oh, where's the next Star Wars celebration going to be? It's going to be in LA.
Oh, okay. Back
Yeah.
to California.
Yeah, they're going to bring it back to the US. And I can see why, because it's going to be held in 2027, which will be the 50th anniversary of the original Star Wars, by which point the Lucasfilm Museum will already be open, which I'm assuming is the driving force behind having it there. But I guess, I don't know, just given the political climate that we are living in, I'm just like wondering what's it going to be like 2 years from now for those who are abroad being able to come here easily to celebrate Star Wars.
Well, yeah, we'll see. Well, funny how that story about fighting fascism is no longer relevant anymore, huh?
If only.
So yeah, I want to put a pin on the Star Wars talk because again, you said that Japan was always a bucket list place for you, and we follow each other on Instagram. I did see you went to the Ghibli Museum.
I did.
Tell me about that. Tell me about your experience there.
It was lovely. There was so much about it that didn't surprise me in terms of who Miyazaki is as a person. For one thing, it's located in a park in Mitaka. Like seriously, like if not that far away from it is a blooming cherry blossom tree. So that didn't surprise me too much. There were no photographs allowed inside the museum, which I already knew. And so it was nice to not have the pressure of having to document everything. I just take it all in. I saw a short film that you can only see at the museum called Koro's Big Day Out, and that was every dog owner's worst nightmare coming true in animation. But it was very cute and very beautifully done. And even though there were no subtitles for it, I think that's maybe a mark of good filmmaking, which is that you don't have to understand the language to understand the story. So I thought that was very well done. And oh, I'll say this: one of their permanent exhibits has a series of like artist studios just to show someone what goes into the making of an animated project, particularly for Ghibli. And I think that for anyone who's used that stupid AI software to create Ghibli style images needs to see that part of the museum, if anything, just to show that, you know, you taking like a few minutes to copy someone else's artwork and also taking away from the environment on top of that. Like you need
it goes against
it to wake up.
it goes against everything Miyazaki stands for. Like those
Exactly.
AI images, like on every level, because
Yeah.
they're like computer generated, as you said. Like AI is very environmentally, you know, deleterious. So like everything that Miyazaki stands for, the people who engage in that Ghibli AI filter or whatever,
Hmm.
don't understand. I mean, and half of them probably didn't even know they were making Ghibli specific, you know, images because it just got popular. Like, you know,
Yeah.
like when the freaking White House is Ghiblifying their horrific, you know, immigration enforcement, you know, we've lost the plot.
Yeah. Exactly.
Any other bucket list things you got to do while you were in Tokyo? Because you were only in Tokyo, you didn't get a chance to really venture too far outside. Like, if you had a chance to go to Nagoya, you could have gone to the actual Ghibli park. You
I
know.
know. Yeah. Yeah. I had to make a hard choice. I figure it'd be wisest to just stick to Tokyo for this trip. Because I think anything else beyond that would have been maybe a little too out of the way for this trip at
How long were
least.
you there? How many days?
I was there for a little over a week. So I was there from the 13th to the 21st.
Oh,
And
you
that just,
literally
yeah,
just
so I
got
just
back.
got back last night.
My goodness. And you were like, I gotta talk about it with somebody. I don't need to rest. I don't need to do it. I just gotta talk about my trip. So yeah, did you go to like the Shibuya crossing? Did you get to mix
I did
into that
Shibuya
scramble of
Crossing.
people and
Yes, I did Shibuya Crossing, and that was a sight to behold for, you know, all street crossing lovers. This is the paradise for it. And if you want
you
to
know
play
you
that
could go up to
best,
like a cafe and like look down
I
on what
did.
people.
I did
Yeah.
that. I went to what's it called? I think Max Park or Max Place, whatever it's called. Yeah, I did that. I went to Team Labs. I went to Tokyo Disneyland. I went to two Pokemon centers.
Nice.
It was honestly unintentionally a celebration of a lot of my favorite franchises.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the only exception is Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I think that's only because I don't think that show ever aired in Japan. So,
Yeah. I don't think
but
it's
if
very
it
popular
did, I'm sure there would be something for it in Japan.
there. Yeah, so you were in Akihabara. I saw. I'm just going off your
Akihabara.
Instagram right now and
Hmm.
Shinjuku. So you've really got to see most of like the main neighborhoods
Hmm.
in
Yeah,
Tokyo.
yeah.
What was your favorite?
Oh gosh. Um, I don't know if I have a favorite. I haven't really. Again, I just got back. I haven't really compartmentalized to be like, what was
You
good,
still
what
like,
wasn't good.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't
How
know.
about let me get more specific. What's the best thing you ate when you were there?
Best thing I ate. Um, One that comes to mind was at Tokyo Disneyland. They have a Baymax curry there, which was really
Oh,
good.
nice.
And then upon seeing it, you're just like, I don't want to eat this. It's too cute. They make Baymax out of rice, and then he's sitting
Yeah,
amongst like two different types of curry.
nice. I've never been to Tokyo Disney. That's one place in Japan I haven't been. How does that compare to the other Disney parks?
I think the one in California has a lot more to it. I take that back. The one in California has a lot more to it. I think I can't compare it to Disney Sea because I didn't go to it, but I have a
Mm,
feeling that if I strategize my schedule just a little bit better, I could have hit it up. But yeah, I think there's a lot to Tokyo Disneyland that, you know, if you've never been to, definitely should go because there's some stuff there that you'll only find at that park. Like for instance, they have a Beauty and the Beast ride that is beautifully done. That I was very fortunate to ride.
mm.
Um, they have a Baymax ride, which is very cute as well. They have a tiki room, which I know there's one in California, but this one was taken over by Stitch.
Mm.
Yeah,
The live action Stitch?
no, I think it's just like normal animated
Normal Stitch. Okay.
But I get your point there. It's like it's funny how I went to it the year the live action Stitch is coming out. Also for It's a Small World. I don't know if this is the case for the California Disneyland right now, but at this It's a Small World, Groot was taking over it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And other Marvel characters too.
Does Marvel have a big presence at the Tokyo Disney?
Not as much as California Adventure.
So yeah, I mean, this probably won't be your last time in Japan, I'm assuming.
Better not be. By the time when I was getting ready to go fly back, I'm like, I don't want to leave.
Yeah, that's everybody's experience leaving Japan.
Yeah, it's safe, it's clean, the people are really nice, the food is really good. There's no crazy person running the country. What more can you ask for?
At least you had no issues getting back in the country, right? You were fine there. There was
No, I had no issues, thankfully. I did bring a burner phone with me because of, all that's been going on.
And you're here freely speaking with us and not locked up anywhere. So thank God for that, Lauren.
I know. Yeah, I legitimately was very worried about that when I started hearing more about this kind of stuff happening. I'm like, should I still go? But I'm also like, I've been planning this for months and I haven't been out of the country since 2009.
Right.
So I'm like, I got to stick to it and just, hope for the best, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you went. I'm glad you had a good time. I'm glad you got to cross that off your bucket list at least. Yeah. And again, you're probably the biggest Star Wars fan on the site, so thankful you were there at Celebration. Any last words before we wrap up?
Go to Japan.
And don't come back. We should just go there and stay.
Yeah.
At least for the next 4 years, maybe we'll just camp out. Anyway, Lauren, thanks for doing this. Thank you for spending your recovery time talking about your trip to Star Wars Celebration. How can folks, if you want them to, find you on the internet?
I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky at Echo Lauren Lola. Not on Twitter anymore. Took a while.
Don't blame you.
And yeah, you just follow me on there. I'm finally posting pictures from Japan on Instagram. So if you want to see that, go check them out.
Cool. Any projects you're working on right now?
I am, right before I went to Tokyo, I came out with a new comic book at WonderCon called Mix, which I co-wrote with Patricia Janelsa, which is part of the Lumpia franchise. So if you want to go get a copy and you're not within vicinity of a place that's going to hold an event for Lumpia, go to kidheroes.net. But I am working on a second graphic novel right now for Struggle and Strength, which is where Dasig was published through. I don't know when it'll be out, but that is in fact in progress.
Awesome. That's very cool. Very, very cool. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color on all social media platforms. Subscribe to the podcast, Hard NOC Life at hardknockmedia.com. That's it for this special edition of the podcast. Thank you to Lauren for repping at Star Wars Celebration. And thank you all for listening. Until next time, we'll be back. May the Force be with you.
Yes, may the Force of others be with you.